Hey, I found this video essay, or I guess Substack essay outline and thesis in my iPad, and I'm really excited to make a really quick, hopefully topical video about fashion culture and what I think about it, especially because it's going to be the groundwork for how I talk about fashion in 2025. And if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen me hint at this idea repeatedly. So the thesis is that earnestness will have to progress, and sincerity is the future of the world and the culture and fashion, but also that Galliano's couture show at Margiela is evidence that people are looking for that earnestness, and any culture writer or person on Twitter who is resisting that because they have a political motive and agenda, not because they're actually doing an analysis of culture. The response to the Margiela couture show was the biggest indicator that people miss sincerity, they miss earnestness, and they are tired of this ironic and post-ironic, superficial, fascist-leaning art culture. People miss poetry, they miss Tumblr, they miss people being cringe, they miss people, doing too much. They miss it, right? And it's because it's much needed, and it leaves this huge gaping hole in your heart to keep shutting off your emotions, being insincere, being superficial, and refusing to open up and connect with people, especially in really difficult times. It just doesn't work. The ironic slogans and the defensiveness and the refusal to let people in at a time like this, it's showing to not work, and I'm glad. So I start off by writing about how I feel like fashion can be an opportunity to reconstruct a reality as a teleportation into the fantasy realm. And I've talked about this before. I do always believe that people are really resistant to seeing photography from Jürgen Teller, not because of the things that they say, but I think largely because people are uncomfortable seeing images that are not hyper perfected, hyper beautified, and affirm to them that there is a way to perfect until you can't feel pain anymore. And I feel like this was the case with the Vogue Angel Reese images recently as well, where the response was so hostile, it was unreasonable, and people seemed so disappointed with it. And they're normal, beautiful looking images, but again, I don't think people want to see anything that reminds them of mortality or decay or tragedy or humanity or complexity. They want a very superficial, hyper perfected, hyper glamorized image to look at because they want that to be reflected. They want to see it and know that it's possible for them, that if they work to perfect and hide the fact that they have wrinkles or pores, that maybe they can keep doing that and working away from the natural occurrences like aging and decay. If you never age, you don't have to be reminded that you're closer and closer to, expiring. You never age, you can be like a robot. But if you do see signs of aging like wrinkles, and if you do see things that remind you of your humanity, how can you escape the fact that there's tragedy in life? And so I think that fashion is an opportunity for people to transport themselves into fantasy, but I think there are different ways that we see that it can be expressed. And I said that I feel, in my opinion, Galliano's work deals with reconciling what reality is and addressing it head on, and then envisioning a more beautiful future. I think that Galliano's work acknowledges that the world is tragic and complex and painful and difficult, but I still think that I always find an element of fantasy in his work. Not only does his work deal in historic references, but he also has, especially at the House of Dior, worked in contemporary references and sometimes to tragic occurrences, but there's always drama and there's always a way to manifest fantasy. There's a way of creating a reality that he wishes to see, or that he makes true in the world, and casting beauty into a world that is complex. He shares a complicated vision of the world through his design, but it is the most ultimate beauty, the most ultimate form of finding and forcing and forging beauty out of a difficult and tragic and complex world, which I think is, beautiful and poetic and speaks to his artistic vision. I don't think Galliano is running away from the fact that we have mortality and decay and tragedy. It's just a very complex vision of the world, and I think that that's really consistent with his design vision. I said that Galliano's couture show combats the ambiguity of designers and audiences in this digital fashion culture with a grounded identity as well. This is me saying that I think because Galliano is a much more tenured designer, the fashion public has to work through seeing somebody express themselves in a way that is honest and true and has nothing to do with just trying to capitalize on internet clout and, you know, making viral bags or viral it products for the online world, which isn't to say that Galliano doesn't have a ton of experience making it bags, and he has a ton of experience making products into extremely successful merchandise at fashion houses, but I think the way that he designs is much more earnest and much more complex and much more aligned with the romance and artistic expression of like a writer or a poet, and I think that we don't always see that in fashion, especially not right now, because there's this desperation to you know, satisfy investors, desperate need to make a viral product every season, to orient everything around data and marketing and not around satisfying a customer with beauty and, you know, creating beautiful design that's functional but also extremely glamorous and considers the woman and heightens the experience of being a woman dressing in fashion. Like, I don't think that every designer has the ability to do that, because consider what they're being trained on in school and consider what the expectations are once they are placed at these fashion houses. Like, when you're interacting with Galliano's work, you are dealing with a designer from a completely different era. People don't even have that same understanding of what they want to include in their wardrobe. And so I think I was just trying to say that he has a much more grounded identity, and I think that what he's working through and processing in his work is very different than what a lot of young designers who are getting 1 or 2 seasons at these fashion houses and then getting canned. It's a very different statement from him, and I think he has a very different position to prove. Just being an excellent seamstress or tailor or dressmaker is not enough. He has a very defined story to tell. I didn't properly introduce this section, but I was reading my Instagram caption. It made me remember that the point of this video was supposed to be about the contrast in earnestness and optimism expressed in the couture show by Galliano versus the playful, ironic riffing that Demna does, and why people critique Demna for always being repetitive. And I think that the postmodern versus modern takes on design are a huge example of that. I think this is a conversation that was started by Luis Pisano on Twitter, or if you know the origins, comment below. But yeah, I was contrasting those against each other, so that's what this section is. And then in terms of comparing it to other shows, I was looking at Guesquier's Balenciaga, and I said that Guesquier's Balenciaga is similar to the work that Galliano does in that he is considering the importance of innovation, and I believe that this is something Guesquier said in System magazine, but his emphasis is on innovation rather than just commercial success. And I would compare that to the current Balenciaga that is oriented around really strong merchandising and really strong product, and Demna telling his story in conjunction with the merchandising team and how they're developing product so that the brand can have commercial success, and the marketing team so that they can also have commercial success. And he's, you know, telling his story through that kind of lens. I also would say that Demna's dialogic relationship with his audience, I would contrast against Galliano's, because not only is the House of Margiela known for being a much more anonymous fashion house and less in dialogue with their audience in that very direct way, I don't think that this is a conversation about product with the audience and the irony and, you know, this is what's going on in culture. They know that the audience will be receiving the work, but they are not creating it in dialogue necessarily with the audience so overtly and directly as Demna's Balenciaga, for example. Yeah, the House of Margiela is just known for their anonymity. And you're just blending all of these different ways of representing identity. And I think that because John Galliano is so tenured and so experienced, this is something that he can actually critically understand across every axis of the business model. I said that I think that he acts as a centralizing force because he's older, he's more tenured as a designer, worked on his sobriety and finding his footing and finding himself as well throughout this time period. I quoted Fashion Desire and Anxiety, where they described Sean Ellis's work as challenging the persistently eroticized body, and I think that John Galliano's work does that as well. It challenges the idea that having a sheer top, for example, or even a sheer bottom has to be eroticized in such an overt way rather than just a form of displaying and highlighting the beauty of the human body. And I think my conclusion was that Rather than romanticizing the past with all of his references to the past in uncertain times, Galliano represents a complex vision of temporality. Although his work uses many historic references, he isn't telling a story about a more beautiful time. His work is very grounded in the modern detritus, murky, gloomy, dead, inanimate dolls at the couture show, the webbed and aged patina on the garments, the ripped and webbed garments, and that his work complicates the beauty of existence is something that comes from his tenure and his experience and his sincerity and his earnestness and what he wanted to communicate with that show based on his experience within the fashion industry and his ability to reclaim and redeem his reputation and things like that. And I don't think that that's something that we've seen, and that's why I think there was such a strong reaction to it. And I think to ignore that and keep making these articles and tweets and comment section posts saying like we're moving towards conservatism, it's absurd. You can see that we're not. You can see that we're moving towards sincerity and away from this just idea of the superficial and the ironic and refusing to open up. We are not moving towards that. We are resistant to it. We hate it. We are feeling negatively about it. We are having negative critical opinions about AI and its impact on art. We're having negative and critical opinions about these owners of the social media companies who are proving to be horrible and creating horrible environments online and horrible art and horrible culture. We can't just say that because a lot of people are doing it that is a meaningful cultural shift. Like, it's for the worse, and the people who are purveyors of cultures and advancing culture are moving towards sincerity, are moving towards earnestness, are moving towards care and facilitating hope and fellowship and love towards other people. Right? And you keep seeing all of these atrocities, the fires, all these different things. And what is fixing that? Is it irony? Is it refusing to be honest? Is it refusing to be sincere? Is it joking? No. It's sincerity. It's honesty. It's earnestness. It's taking things seriously and not jumping to make a joke because you're so uncomfortable opening up. Right? And if you see that, you cannot say that we're moving towards one direction just because, you know, people with power are demanding that the lowest common denominators in our society do that. Like, we don't like it, we are resistant to it, and that's good, and that's why I love fashion, for representing it. So that's what I think, and hopefully this was an easy video to watch, and I really appreciate you guys. I'm going to drink some more of my matcha, and I am going to, oh my gosh, I need to go to sleep. I'm gonna watch some Crunchyroll. I'm probably gonna watch Cowboy Bebop because it makes me go to sleep really quickly. But thank you, love you.